Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good afternoon. Welcome along to Eddie Howe's press conference review on NUFC matters. And as always, Razor started off from BBC Radio Newcastle asking about ASM. And Eddie Howe said he wasn't 100% sure on where he was at with his recovery. There's been no setback, but it is taking a little bit longer than expected. Razor then moved on to Almiron, pointed out that he played the best part of the second half last week and asked, is he ready if needed? Against Spurs, he went, he's an option, but he's got limited, he's had limited training after quite a long absence. So still treading a little bit with caution with Almiron. He then pushed on Almiron and just said, how has his game developed, under your stewardship? And he basically said, look, Almiron's already, had the physical capabilities. He says he helps us with a high press. He's developed and he links well with players such as Kieran Trippier and Bruno Guimaraes. But ultimately, he's always had that within him. And yeah, he has developed, like all players have, in the short space of time that he's been at the club. Razor then asked his age, 29. Almiron, that is, not Eddie Howe. Is it common to see, someone develop parts of the game this late in their career? Eddie agreed. He said it's slightly unusual. Pointed towards his goal scoring form, but gave him credit. He said he's got his head down. He's been training after everybody else has finished to work on his finishing ability. So he's put the work in himself. Then Razor moved on to Emil Kraft. Just said, how was he doing? He said he's doing well. He's back on grass. Says obviously it was a big injury, a nasty injury. Now that he's back on grass, he's treading carefully, but he's moving fluently. He just said he wasn't sure that we would see him in the squad. Going to implement his training lightly as things go on, but probably much more for next season. Emil Kraft now. Razor then moved on to the big game at the weekend on Sunday. He said, how crucial is this game against Spurs? He said, it's a huge game for us. Games are running out. I'm pleased we're at home and we've got to really respond to last week's defeat at Aston Villa. Razor then, last question from him, he just said, it's how significant is that, the race for Europe, although Eddie Howe won't look at it as a race for Europe, is in our hands. And he went, look, it could be in our hands. A lot of it depends on this big week ahead, 3 games in a week. We've got to respond. And yeah, he won't ever talk about Europe. That's one thing you won't get out of him. But, he says it is a significant week. Next up, Keith from Sky Sports News. He basically probed on last week's defeat against Villa. He asked how confident Eddie was that last week was a one-off. Eddie said, I'm hopeful. He said, we've been so consistent this season. Last week was the first time that we didn't deliver. We didn't deliver our hallmarks, as he called them, that we are known for, the high press, the good defensive unit, etc. So he then asked, how do you put it right? Eddie just answered how I expected him to, really. We analyse the game, we reflect on the game, and we try to put it right on the training ground. He said this week there's been a good attitude, no negativity, and in himself he's confident that the team will put it right. Keith then asked if Newcastle were to draw against Spurs, he would be happy. He said no, we play to win, and again, we all expected that. Crowd was next on Keith's list of questions. He said this game is quite similar to big games you've had in the past. How important are the crowd? I really just see these questions as fillers from the press. We all know the answer to the question. We all know what Eddie's going to say. He just waxed lyrical about the fans and, compared it to games such as Chelsea, Manchester United, in games where, the interaction between the supporters and what they've seen on the pitch is helped to push them forward. So he just agreed and said, yeah, we need the help. Keith then mentioned it's a huge week, which had been mentioned already by Reza. He just said, you've had a previous week like this when you were in London. Do you wish you could bottle what you had down there? And Eddie just said, look, yeah, it was a great week. We gave a lot physically and mentally. Our energies were good. And he says this week will be very similar. It's going to be a good examination of our credentials. Keith then said, is a big defensive effort needed this week? And he went, yeah, they've got a strong front line. We need to be at our best defending and pressing. The reverse fixture was a great result for Newcastle. At Tottenham earlier in the season, he says we protected the goal, we put in a good performance, but that game means nothing going into this game. Andy Sixsmith was next. Likes to have a little bit of joke with Eddie. Likes to get a few laughs. And he said the day after the Villa game, you were straight out watching local football, watching your sons play. Did you pick anything up from the boys' game? Eddie laughed, as he does, and just said he didn't take too much from the game tactically, but it was nice to be watching it after the day that he'd had. Andy then pushed him and asked, is going to do that therapeutic for you? Eddie agreed. He just said very few things can relax me. He says, I'm switched on to the job 24/7. He says, but watching the kids play football is definitely one of those things that I relax doing and enjoy doing exercise as well. Of course, didn't want to go into that. Said he'd already gone into that in the past. Andy then asked if there'd been a response at the training ground from the team this week, and he reiterated what he'd said to Razor and Keith. There's been a good response. All of the players react in different ways, but there's been no negativity, no hangover, as he called it. The lads are focused on the job ahead. Andy then picked up a nice little stat, chucked it in there, that Newcastle are 4 points better off at this stage of the season than Keegan's Entertainers were in the year that they didn't win the league. He says, does that put you into perspective as to how far you've come in a short space of time? Eddie just repeated really what he'd said earlier about, apart from the Villa game, the team being consistent. If you drop your levels by 10%, 2%, 10%, whatever in this league, you're going to get punished. And our levels dropped last week and we got punished. Another stat from Andy Sixsmith, the new statue of the press room. He said that the Opta stat suggests that Newcastle have an 81.4% chance of qualifying for the Champions League. Would you agree? I've no idea about that. I don't look at stats. We're focused on Spurs and Spurs alone, is what Eddie said. How much do you relish the big games? Was Andy's last question. He said, as professionals and as man, as the coach, yeah, we do enjoy these games. We're determined to express ourselves the best way possible. Let's hope so. Next up, Andrew from the BBC television. He said, how were you personally after the defeat last week? He said, I spoke honestly after the game with the players. I was reflective. I made sure that they knew it was a collective responsibility. It's always like that. We win together, we lose together. Are you clear in your mind why you lost? Said Andrew. He just said he never believes there's one reason for success or disappointment. Collectively, there was things that needed to be improved and they have been addressed in training this week. Andrew said, is it safe to say that Spurs is the most important game of the season? Eddie said he didn't have any issues with anyone saying that. He says it's not a cliche, but it is our next game. Longstaff was next on Andrew's agenda, asking if he was back and whether he was fit and how important he is to the team. He said, yep, he's back, he's fit, had a slight illness. And Eddie then, just basically said what he said all season, that he's a huge part of our midfield on and off the ball, keeps the ball. He's invaluable to the team. He's got an eye for a pass, and he does a lot of running and a lot of other people's work that people don't, and a lot of work that people don't see. So ultimately, sounds like Longstaff will be straight back in tomorrow, and I don't think anybody could have an issue with that. Andrew then pointed to the fixture list, saying the 2 more games had been switched for television coverage towards the end of the season. 22 out of 25 was the figures that Andrew gave for games that Newcastle have featured on TV. He says, what does that say about you and your team? Eddie just said, we'll get used to varied kickoffs. It's part and parcel of the job. I'm pleased that people like to watch us play, is what he said. Finally, from Andrew, he's asking about the changes in the stadium. He said Newcastle are a potential Euro 28 venue. Have you heard of any plans to change the venue, to increase the capacity? Eddie has been asked this before, but he answered in the same way. He doesn't have any information. Of course, it's not his job to put that out there, but any improvements which enhance people, coming to watch games at Newcastle United, it gets his approval because it's a great place to play. They moved on to the written press, and that was Damien up first. He was talking about the defeat again last week. He says, does it hit harder when you're not used to losing? He went, it's a horrible feeling, whether it's regular or not. And he said the fact that we lost and we didn't perform last week, he says that's the worst type of defeat. So for him, thoroughly, hated that experience last week. Damien, again, talking about Spurs, is it the acid test for how far you've come and how good this team can be? He agreed. He said, yeah. He says, because Spurs will test us in so many different ways. They've got dangerous players in Kane and Son and others. But he says in previous games against, teams, in this kind of setting this season, we've done well. We've responded. So he's expecting the same on Sunday. Jordan was next, asking if Eddie was prepared to say that we were in a top 4 battle, a battle for Champions League. And he went, no, I'll let you say that and concentrate on winning as many games as we know we can. Basically just wouldn't answer whether we're in a European battle, just said he could say it. Just going to concentrate on winning games, which is fair enough. He was then asked, did he know the importance of this game? And he says, yeah, of course I do. Ashby was next on Jordan's list. Just wanted to know what he thought about his first appearance in a black and white shirt and how injury had impacted his arrival. He went, the injury has been a minor hamstring. It has slightly impacted his start at the club, but it hasn't dented his ability. And, he's played well. And Jordan then asked him if it might see, an appearance in the first team squad at some point. He said, yeah, it could lead to an appearance in the first team squad. We are monitoring him and I am watching him. Craig Hope was next. He said this game was the first game of the new ownership, and then you came along a couple of months later. He says a couple of weeks later, sorry. Can you see the difference in the club from then and now? We've had these type of questions before, and Eddie just answers it in the same way. And again, I just think it's a bit of a wasted question from Craig, this, but he just, all he's going to say is that the club's changed a lot on and off the pitch, which is what he said. Only new bit we got out of that was that he said the press conferences have changed. There's a different tone, and it's nice to reflect on what we've done, but it's also nice to look ahead. Craig's next question again, are there parallels with Spurs? He says a lot of people have always said, they've compared us to Tottenham Hotspur. And he was going on about the stability of other clubs, including Spurs. He was going like, there seems to be a lot of instability at Spurs, for example. There needs to be a lot of instability at other clubs, and is it reassuring the stability you've got at our club? Eddie again won't comment on other clubs. He went, I never comment on other clubs, but all he said was we've been well run from above. There's a vision. There always has been a vision and stability, and there's trust, and that helps us move forward. Luke Edwards was next. Started off with a bit of humour by congratulating Eddie on not giving in and not admitting that we're in a race for the Champions League. He just thanked them with a few laughs, and then he said, you need a result after Villa. And he just said, I don't need reminding of that. Never, you never want to lose a game like that. You don't go into a game trying to lose that kind of game, and time will tell, on how we respond. So obviously they need to get back on the horse this weekend. He then mentioned about the squad. It was a new experience for them. Are they mentally strong enough to get through, that kind of defeat and come into this game against Spurs? And Eddie said, all season I've seen a team that can cope. There's lots of experience in the dressing room and we are well equipped. And then Luke moved on to the fans again, just saying the fans being behind you, that's obviously a positive. And he went, that's a key thing. I don't underestimate the support. We need them, and they'll make it a hard place to play. Oscar was next from the Sun. On reflection, was it worse, he said, the Villa game when you watched it back? And he went, no, watching it back, it wasn't. He says, but it works both ways. In match time, it's, you might think you played exceptionally well. You watch it back and you haven't. You might think you've been exceptionally poor and you weren't. He says it's not as always high and low as it is as you're watching it live. He did admit that he was in a terrible mood on Monday. Simon was next. I think it was Simon Bird from the Mirror. Just asked him about Bruno's ankle. Now, he answered this last week. Simon said that he thought he was labouring last week. And asked if his injury was okay and his ankle was all right. And he went, Bruno's ankle is fine. He's not missing any training through it. He's not covering up an injury and he's fine. So that was that. Kieran next. Says in certain games last week, players were booed off the pitch. Is the togetherness important that you have in your dressing room? He was just talking about the unity in our dressing room, etc. And he just said, look, we have a good atmosphere in the dressing room. We act the same way whether we win or lose. That's easy to say and it's hard to deliver. He says we take any criticism in the right way and we move on very quickly from defeats and focus on the next game. Kieran also mentioned about the record against those teams that we've been in and around is very good this season. He goes, I always take confidence from those kind of wins, but that means nothing. Again, reiterated that the win against Spurs earlier in the season means nothing. This is a new game. This is they've got a new manager at present, and this will be a completely different game. It's a different part of the season, etc. Reporter of the, I don't often give a reporter of the press conference, but Lee Ryder, outstanding today, son. Some great questions. He asked a question which I've heard and we've discussed on the show: is it time for change in the defence? Eddie Howe paused and then said, well, there's a complex answer to that. He says, I'll always pick a settled defence that will win a game, but I've got no problem with change. He then went on to say that the back four this season's been outstanding. They've got a great record, but I'm not afraid to change it if I need to. And if I've got to make that call, I will do. He then pushed him and said, Byrne staying in the team clearly shows his credentials. And Eddie didn't give anything away at all. He basically, because I think what Lee's wanting to know is Matt Targett going to get a chance, and is Byrne going to get dropped? It was a very good way of trying to do it. But he just said, Dan Byrne's an incredible player and an incredible person. He's similar to Sean Longstaff, and I value him in whatever position he plays in. So, he didn't get the answers he wanted, but it was fair play to him. He's asking the questions the fans are asking. He then mentioned about Gordon getting straight back in last week. And some people thought that wasn't the right thing to do. And again, Eddie's so cute, doesn't get drawn into any controversy, doesn't lose his temper, keeps his cool, and just turned it round to a fact that he's a young player, he's got passion, he's got drive, and that will help him develop his game day to day. He's a great person to have around the club. He's driven. And he's driven to improve all the qualities that he has, and he's a top player, and he's going to get better and better. So simple as that, really. And Lee then, chipped in with, well, if you take that kind of side of his character away, you've only got half a player, and Eddie agreed with him. He said, exactly, there's lots more to come from Anthony Gordon. Lee then finished off with, Spurs seeming rattled. Levy, again, he didn't mention directly what he's been saying, but talking about us again and talking about, financial sides of things. He says, is this a good time to play Spurs? And Eddie just said, I see a team of internationals who are very well managed. It'll be a tough game. Simple as that. Martin Hardy got back to what Craig was talking about. I don't know whether these two, sat down and spoke to each other before the press conference and thought they'd try to get the same kind of story, but he just said, did you expect such a turnaround at the club when you arrived? What's the key to the success? And he just said, look, when I arrived at the club, the brief was to stay up, and I was thinking about nothing else. And in the summer, it was all about recruitment, which we got, spot on. And, that's the most important thing. Martin then asked him, where does Sunday rank as a game this season? He went, it's up there with a cup final. And, we're running out of games, and each game becomes more important to hit your end goal. But, tells you how important the game is when he's comparing it to the cup final. Martin then mentioned Mark Taylor, who was diagnosed many years ago now with motor neurons disease, former non-league player in the region, who had a visit to the club. Eddie just said it was amazing to meet him, great experience for him, his family, and Mark watched training, and he said that the players worked hard, which Eddie took as a big compliment. But he said, he says having Mark at the club was very inspiring. Mark was next. Mark Douglas, I think it was. Another great question, just asking about starting games slowly and have you addressed that? Because in the last few games, Newcastle have, I think it's, I think we've all seen it. They've started the game slowly. And I don't think Eddie liked it, to be honest. I think it stirred him a little bit. He said it's a tough one that, we let West Ham in, Bruno hit the post, but then we went on and scored early. He says Brentford was a tough start, I'll give you that. Villa was a tough start. But he says when you're the home team, you want to set your marker down. All he said was about the Spurs game, we need to be mentally alert. He said in training, this is Mark Douglas, he says, in training, do you change things when a defeat like that happens? And he just said, look, we always change things. He says, we've got what core sessions, but yeah, ultimately we do change things, on occasions, and depending on what we want to achieve. Lastly, Miles Starford from the Shields Gazette. 2 simple questions, 2 simple answers. Any fresh injuries? No. And is ESM back in the country? No. He's coming back early next week. Okay, that's your press conference review. As always, I'll have a quick quick look into the chat, see who's in. Good evening, good afternoon, BT. Eddie sounded a bit vague on ASM and his return. He did, but next week he says, so we'll watch what happens there. A bit concerned about Emil Kraft not being available this season. Bearing in mind he only has 1 year left on his contract. Yeah, that injury was a bad one. And it was. Keith Downey question on a draw this weekend was rather negative. Good response from Eddie. I would agree. Hi, Tom. Hi, Darren, Les, Kevin. Hope you're okay. What else have we got? Yeah, it's not pre-recorded. Yes, yeah. I don't look at the chat until later on because I'm doing this on my own, Darren. Yeah, the whole Chelsea squad was yesterday put up for sale, willing to listen to offers for all players. Not surprised, mate. They're now not going into the Champions League. That's absolutely crazy, isn't it? What a crazy situation. Makes you wonder if we'll target any of our players. We have been linked with João Felix, but it's literally just a paper talk at the minute. Heard we've been quoted 80 million for Mason Mount. Crazy money. 100 million for Rice is madness. He's worth about 40 million. Even Lamps is not playing Mount or starting him, just leaving him on the bench for some reason. Yeah, it's a strange situation, isn't it? It really, really is. And Mr. Anderson, strange that I'm not getting notifications from YouTube anymore for the shows, but I am here. Hang up, Steve. Not sure why that is, Mr. Anderson. Maybe check your subscription. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the little bell and then click all. That's the best thing to do. YouTube have changed things and maybe you're only subscribing to some of the shows and not all the shows. I don't understand it. They've created this new podcast thing and it takes a bit of getting used to. But if you click the bell and click all notifications, then that will be fine. And sometimes if they reboot the system, they could change things. So that probably helps you, mate. That probably helps you. But yeah, great stuff, folks. I am back for the Amigos at 5 o'clock till 7. Full squad tonight, I think. Keith should be back on as well. Little update on John as well. John is okay. He's had a tough time in hospital. I'm sure he will let you all know next time he's in the chat. But he is recovering. And he's in the right place. So thoughts with John Justice Allen today. I'll play out with the ads. I'll see you at 5 o'clock. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract free and pay as you go waste collection. Thanks also to Mr. Vicky's, handmade in Cumbria. These sauces are really hot stuff. You can order them by emailing info@mrvickys.co.uk or by telephoning 01768 210 102. Thanks to Neil and the guys at Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, nufcmatters.com. If you want to subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button tonight. It is free. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video and click share to share to your other social media. If you want to join the channel, hit join. There's 3 different tiers. Pick the one that suits you and help support the channel financially. If you want to pay a one-off membership fee of £25 and get these goodies, a scarf, a pen, a cup, and entry into the monthly draw, then go to NUFC Matters and look for membership pack. Failing that, get your smartphone and put it over the QR code and it will take you straight there. We're also a podcast and you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean and other podcast providers. Usually goes up 24 hours after the show has finished. We also support the food bank on this channel. If you want to make a virtual donation today at the Matchday Bucket, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and you can make a deposit today. Don't forget to enter the Shearer raffle. There's 150 tickets, £1 per ticket, and you can win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. If you have a look on our website, we've also got a vast range of mugs, t-shirts, cups, and whatever else takes your fancy. The Isaac t-shirt is proven popular this month, $16.99 plus delivery from nufcmatters.com. Don't forget as well, we do a range of events over the course of the year. We have Peter Beardsley, an up-close and personal evening at the Tynemouth Surf Cafe. Limited tickets remain, 25th of April. Get them now from Surf Cafe, tynemouth.co.uk or from ticketweb.uk. There's also an evening with Peter Beardsley on May the 19th at the Tyneside Irish Centre, and you can get tickets from newcastlelegends.com, and tickets are £50. Don't forget our end of season do takes place 27th of May, 7 o'clock at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets for that one are a tenner, and nufcmatters.com is where you can get your tickets for that. In June, Thursday the 1st of June to be precise, Rob Lee will be at Louis Liquor Store in the Big Market in Newcastle, and tickets for that are available direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark and John Beresford takes place the next evening on Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth. This is a charity event and tables are of £10, £700, and you can book them by contacting Natalie at heelandtoe.org.uk or visiting their website. In July, Gavin Peacock is in Newcastle on July the 10th at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets for that are available from nufcmatters.com. And he also takes an evening with at the Surf Cafe in Tynemouth on the 11th of July. So get your tickets direct from the venue for that one as well. And if you're a boxing fan, the Night of Champions, Ricky Hatton, Frank Bruno, Nigel Benn and Joe Calzaghe takes place at the Fed. And that will be taking place on the 16th of June. More dates to be added. Tickets from all those events, www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk.